The alarm bells rang through the crystal halls of Nexus Prime for the first time in 50 years. Council Speaker Velian's four arms moved quickly across the emergency controls as representatives from across the galaxy rushed into the great chamber. The Altarian's blue skin had turned pale, and her usually calm voice shook as she called the session to order. "We have a crisis," Velian announced. "The humans are gone." A strange silence filled the room. The crystalline Vorthak delegates made soft, chiming sounds of confusion. The aquatic Neritans in their water suits bubbled nervously. Even the hive-minded Calyx seemed uncertain, their shared thoughts creating an unusual static in the air. "What? Do you mean gone?" asked Zephyr, the tall Altarian military commander. His golden eyes reflected the council chamber lights as he leaned forward in his seat. Velian activated the central holographic display. Empty space appeared where busy human colonies should have been. Silent stations floated in the void where human voices once filled the communication channels. Ships that had been docked at human ports were gone without a trace. 3 months ago, every human settlement, every human ship, every human research station simply vanished. No distress calls, no warning messages, no explanation. They just left. The room erupted in confused chatter. Different species spoke in their native languages, creating a storm of sound that Velian had to quiet with her ceremonial staff. "This makes no sense," said Counselor Reef, the Nereid representative. Water bubbled around her gills as she spoke through her translation device. "Humans don't just disappear. They talk about everything. They ask questions. They make plans and tell everyone about those plans." The Vorthak delegate, Crystal Singer Harmony, created a series of musical tones that translated as agreement. "Humans are predictable. They follow rules. They keep schedules. This behavior is completely unlike them." Commander Zephyr pulled up, military reports on his personal display. "Our border patrols confirm it. Every human military vessel has vanished from their patrol routes. The Earth Embassy here on Nexus Prime is empty. Even the human cafeteria in the diplomatic quarter is closed." "What about their home system?" asked another voice from the council floor. "Earth itself is gone," Velian said quietly. "Not destroyed. Gone. Like it was never there." The room fell silent again. For over a century, humans had been a steady presence. In galactic affairs, they weren't the strongest species or the smartest. Their technology was decent but not amazing. Their military was respectable but not feared. They were just reliable. They showed up to meetings, they kept their promises, they helped solve problems between other species. "Have we tried contacting them?" asked the Calyx Prime node, speaking for all the connected minds of their species. "Of course," Velian replied. "We've sent messages on every frequency humans ever used. We've checked every star system they ever visited. We've contacted every trade partner they ever dealt with. Nothing." She paused and looked around the chamber at the hundreds of representatives from dozens of species. 3 days ago, we found something." The holographic display changed to show the human embassy building on Nexus Prime. It looked normal from the outside, but the inside was completely empty. No furniture, no computers, no personal belongings. Nothing except a single message written on the wall of what used to be Ambassador Taman's office. The words appeared in the display, translated into every language in the chamber. "We thank the Council for the century of cooperation. Our departure is not from anger, but from necessity. What comes next was always inevitable. We are sorry." "That's it?" Commander Zephyr stood up from his seat. "That's their explanation? They just say sorry and disappear?" "It's very human," commented Crystal Singer Harmony. "They always apologize for things they can't control." Counselor Reef made the Nerid gesture for confusion, her tentacles moving in slow circles. "But what did they mean about what comes next? What's inevitable?" Velian dimmed the lights and brought up a star chart of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations where human colonies had been. "We've been studying their departure patterns. Look at this." The red dots began to blink in sequence, showing the order in which human settlements had vanished. It wasn't random. The outer colonies had gone first, then the middle settlements, and finally the core worlds, including Earth. They didn't just leave, Velian continued. They evacuated in a planned order. This took months of preparation, maybe years. Preparation for what? The question came from all over the chamber as different species asked the same thing in their own languages. "We don't know," Velian admitted. "But there's something else." The star chart changed to show the galactic rim, the dark space beyond the spiral arms where few ships ever traveled. Small blips of light appeared and disappeared along the edge. Our long-range sensors have been picking up strange readings from the rim, energy signatures we don't recognize, movement patterns that don't match any known species. Commander Zephyr studied the display carefully. His military training made him notice things others might miss. "Those movement patterns? They're organized, coordinated. That's not random space debris or natural phenomena." "No," Velian agreed. "It's not." The Calyx Prime node spoke up, their collective voice carrying a note of worry that was unusual for their species. "The rim has been quiet for 3,000 years, since the last time the old machines stirred." An uncomfortable silence spread through the chamber. Every species had legends about the ancient war with the machines. The Devourers, they had been called. Mechanical beings that consumed entire star systems and turned them into more machines. Most council members treated those stories as ancient history, myths from a more primitive time. "You think the humans knew something?" asked Counselor Reef. "About the rim activity?" "Humans have always been curious," Crystal Singer Harmony chimed. "They study things other species ignore. They ask questions about old history. They read the ancient records." Velian nodded slowly. Ambassador Tae-min requested access to the oldest archives many times, records from before the council existed. Military attaché Ji-woo asked specific questions about ancient defense systems. Scientist Hyun-woo spent years studying old technology fragments. But why leave? Commander Zephyr paced in front of his seat, his golden skin reflecting his agitation. "If they knew about a threat, why not warn us? Why not help us prepare?" "Maybe they are helping," the Calyx Prime node suggested. "Maybe leaving was their way of preparing." The room buzzed with conversation as representatives discussed this possibility in small groups. Some species thought the humans had abandoned them. Others believed there must be a good reason for the departure. A few wondered if the humans had been planning this for years. "What do we do now?" asked Counselor Reef. Velian looked at the empty space on the star charts where human colonies used to be, then at the strange readings from the galactic rim. She thought about Ambassador Tae-min, who had always arrived early to meetings and stayed late to make sure everyone understood each other. She remembered Ji-woo, who had helped design the current patrol schedules that kept the trade routes safe. She pictured Hyun-woo, who had shared his research freely with scientists from every species. "We wait," she said finally, "and we watch the rim, and we hope that whatever the humans knew, whatever made them leave, they were wrong about it being inevitable." But deep in her heart, Velian suspected the humans were never wrong about the important things. They had left for a reason, and that reason was probably heading their way. The council session ended with more questions than answers. As representatives filed out of the chamber, many of them looked up at the stars through the crystal dome overhead. For the first time in a century, the galaxy felt empty, without human voices filling the communication channels. None of them realized that somewhere in the dark between the stars, those human voices were still there. They were just saying very different things now. 6 months had passed since the humans disappeared. The galaxy had slowly adjusted to their absence, though trade routes ran less smoothly and diplomatic meetings took longer to resolve without human mediators to help different species understand each other. The first warning came from the Calyx outer colonies. Prime Node Collective 7 had been monitoring the rim sensors when the readings appeared. Unlike other species that used individual consciousness, the calyx shared their thoughts across their entire population. When one calyx discovered something, they all knew it instantly. The discovery made every calyx in the colony stop what they were doing at exactly the same moment. The patterns, Collective 7 transmitted to Nexus Prime. We recognize the patterns. Council Speaker Velian received the message while reviewing trade agreements. She immediately called for an emergency session, though this time fewer representatives attended. Many species had grown tired of discussing the missing humans and wanted to focus on their own affairs. The Calyx have detected organized movement along the galactic rim, Velian announced to the half-empty chamber. Movement that matches historical records. Commander Zephyr activated his military displays. What kind of historical records? Prime. Node Collective 7's voice filled the chamber through the communication system. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors recorded similar energy signatures, movement patterns, the same mathematical progressions we are seeing now. The chamber grew quiet. Crystal Singer Harmony created a low, worried tone that resonated through her crystalline body. You mean from the ancient war? Yes, from the time of the Devourers. Counselor Reef's tentacles curled in distress. But the Devourers are just stories, old legends to scare children. Not legends, Collective 7 replied. Our collective memory preserves the actual data. The Devourers were real. They were machines that consumed entire star systems. They turned planets into raw materials for building more machines. Commander, Zephyr studied the readings from the rim. His military training helped him see patterns others might miss. These energy signatures, they're not random. Something is building out there, something big. Velian dimmed the lights and brought up the ancient archives. Very few species bothered to read the old records anymore. Most considered ancient history boring and irrelevant to modern life. According to the archives, the Devourers appeared every few thousand years. They would emerge from dark space, consume everything they could reach, then return to dormancy when they had gathered enough resources. Resources for what? Asked a Vorthak representative. For building more of themselves. The archives say they grew stronger with each awakening. Crystal Singer Harmony's tones grew more anxious. If the Devourers are real, and if they're awakening again, then we need to prepare our defenses with... What? Commander Zephyr's golden skin had turned pale. The last war against the Devourers required the combined efforts of dozens of species. Most of those species are extinct now. Their technology is lost. Velian accessed another section of the archives. Actually, not all of it is lost. Look at this. The display showed access records for the ancient archives. The files revealed something disturbing. Over the past 50 years, humans had been the most frequent users of the historical databases. Ambassador Tae-min had requested ancient military records dozens of times. Scientist Hyun-woo had studied old Devourer technology fragments. Military. Atache Ji-woo had analyzed battle tactics from the previous war. The humans were researching the Devourers, Velian said quietly. For decades. Why didn't they tell us? Counselor Reef asked. Prime Node Collective 7 provided the answer through their shared consciousness. Perhaps they did try to tell you. Perhaps you did not listen. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this possibility. Humans had always asked strange questions during council meetings. They wanted to know about old defense systems, ancient alliances, forgotten technologies. Most other species had dismissed these questions as typical human curiosity. Now those questions seemed much more important. Commander Zephyr pulled up military personnel records. I'm looking at Ji-woo's service file. She submitted 17 proposals for improving our defense systems. We rejected most of them as unnecessary. What about the others? Velian asked. Hyun-woo published research papers about machine intelligence and adaptive technology. He warned about the dangers of self-replicating systems. The scientific community ignored his work because it seemed theoretical. Crystal singer Harmony created sad, chiming sounds. Taemin often spoke about the importance of preparing for unknown threats. He suggested creating emergency protocols and hidden supply caches. We thought he was being paranoid. As they dug deeper into human activities from the past decades, a disturbing picture emerged. Every human in the galaxy seemed to have been studying some aspect of the Devourer threat. Scientists researched ancient technology. Diplomats mapped alliance possibilities. Military officers analyzed defensive strategies. They knew, Velian realized. Somehow the humans knew the Devourers were awakening. Then why did they leave? Commander Zephyr demanded. If they knew about the threat, why abandon us? Before anyone could answer, new alarms began ringing throughout the chamber. Emergency communications flooded in from across the galaxy. Outer Rim colonies were reporting massive energy signatures approaching their systems. The first scouts, Prime Node Collective 7 announced, with their characteristic calm. The Devourers send scouts to evaluate targets before the main force arrives. On the main display, grainy sensor images appeared from the Rim colonies. Dark shapes moved through space, too geometric to be natural, too large to be ordinary ships. The images were unclear, but the size estimates were terrifying. Each one is the size of a small moon, Commander Zephyr read from the sensor data, and there are dozens of them. Our Rim colonies are evacuating, Velian reported, but their ships are too slow. The scouts are moving faster than anything in our fleets. Crystal Singer Harmony's crystalline body flickered with nervous energy. How long do we have? According to the ancient records, scout fleets evaluate targets for several months before reporting back to the main force. Then the real attack begins. Counselor. Reef made the Nereid gesture for despair. Our combined fleets are strong, but we've never faced anything like this. The ancient species had technologies we've lost. No, Prime Node Collective 7 corrected. The technologies were not lost. The humans found them. The chamber erupted in confused voices as representatives tried to understand what this meant. The humans spent decades studying ancient Devourer artifacts, Collective 7 explained. They reverse-engineered the technology. They learned how the machines think, how they adapt, how they can be stopped. And then they left, Commander Zephyr said bitterly. They learned how to fight the Devourers and then abandoned us. Or, Velian said slowly, they left to prepare. The room grew quiet as this possibility sank in. Maybe the humans hadn't abandoned the galaxy. Maybe they had gone somewhere to get ready for war. The message they left, Crystal Singer Harmony chimed thoughtfully. They said their departure was from necessity. They said what comes next was inevitable. They knew the Devourers were awakening, Velian concluded, and they knew the galaxy wasn't ready. As if to confirm her words, more reports arrived from the Rim. The scout ships had begun their attacks on the outer colonies. Advanced civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were being destroyed in hours. The Devourers had returned. And somewhere in the dark space between stars, the humans were doing whatever they had left to do. The Altarian defense fleet was the pride of the galaxy. Their ships could move faster than light itself and carried weapons that could crack planets. Commander Zephyr had commanded these forces for 20 years and never lost a battle. The Devourers destroyed his entire fleet in 14 minutes. All ships, fall back! Zephyr screamed into his communicator as his flagship shook under enemy fire. Around him, the bridge crew worked desperately at their stations, but nothing they did seemed to matter. The Devourer ships absorbed every energy blast his weapons fired. They learned from each attack and adapted their defenses instantly. Thus, the Altarians switched to different weapon types. The machines simply adjusted again. "Sir, they're not just defending," reported his tactical officer. They're studying us. Every shot we fire teaches them how our technology works. Zephyr watched in horror as a Devourer ship extended mechanical tentacles toward a damaged Altarian cruiser. The tentacles didn't just destroy the ship. They took it apart piece by piece, analyzing every component. They're reverse engineering our technology in real time, he realized. Every ship they capture makes them stronger. The few surviving Altarian vessels jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Commander Zephyr's golden skin had turned gray with shock as he transmitted his report to Nexus Prime. The Outer Rim is lost. Our weapons are useless. The Devourers adapt faster than we can change tactics. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The crystalline Vorthak had tried to use their energy manipulation abilities against the machines. The Devourers simply absorbed their plasma attacks and redirected the energy back at them with twice the power. Crystal Singer Harmony's voice shook as she described her people's defeat. Our cities of living crystal are gone. The machines didn't. Just destroy them. They learned how to grow crystal technology. Now they're using our own abilities against us. The aquatic Nereidans fared no better. Their bioships, grown from living coral and powered by symbiotic organisms, were completely alien to most enemies. The Devourers studied them for exactly 37 minutes before creating mechanical versions that were faster, stronger, and completely under machine control. They took our bioships apart, Counselor Reef reported through her tears. They figured out how organic technology works. Now they're building mechanical versions of our living vessels. Even the Calyx hive mind proved vulnerable. Their greatest strength, shared consciousness across their entire species, became their greatest weakness when the Devourers learned to hack their mental networks. The machines are in our thoughts, Prime Node Collective 7 transmitted weekly. They've learned to speak our mental language. They're turning our own shared consciousness against us. On Nexus Prime, Council Speaker Velian stared at the tactical displays showing Devourer advancement across the galaxy. Every defensive line failed. Every species' greatest strengths were turned into weapons against them. How is this possible? She asked the empty council chamber. Most representatives had fled to defend their home worlds, leaving only a skeleton crew to coordinate the galactic defense. The answer came from the archives, in records left behind by the humans. Deep in the database, Valian found research files that had been uploaded but never shared with other species. The files belonged to Wanbin, a human engineer who had studied Devourer adaptation algorithms. His research showed exactly how the machines learned and evolved. He had even developed countermeasures, ways to confuse their learning systems and disrupt their adaptation processes. Why didn't he share this? Velian wondered aloud. Another file provided the answer. It was a report from Min Ah, a human psychologist who had studied machine intelligence. Her conclusions were terrifying. The Devourers don't just learn technology, she had written. They learn behavior patterns, cultural weaknesses, species psychology. If they knew we understood their capabilities, they would adapt their learning methods to account for our knowledge. The only way to fight them successfully is to let them believe they have every advantage. Vilian found more hidden human research files. Jae Sung, a human fleet commander, had analyzed every major space battle in galactic history. His tactical studies showed why conventional military strategies would fail against adaptive enemies. Linear battle tactics are predictable, his report stated. Hierarchical command structures are vulnerable to disruption. The Devourers will learn to exploit standard military procedures within hours. Victory requires completely unpredictable strategies that violate every rule of conventional warfare. As Velian read through the human files, she began to understand something incredible. The humans hadn't just known about the Devourer threat, they had spent decades analyzing exactly how the coming war would unfold. They had predicted which species would fall first, which technologies would prove useless, and why traditional galactic defense strategies would fail. They had known the galaxy would burn, But if they knew all this, Velian said to herself, why did they let it happen? The answer came in a heavily encrypted file that required 3 different human access codes to open. It was a message from Ambassador Taemin, dated just days before the human departure. The galaxy must see the true nature of the Devourer threat before it can be defeated, he had written. Every species believes their technology and culture make them superior to others. This pride will prevent the cooperation necessary for victory. Only after they see their greatest strengths turned against them will they be ready to try a completely different approach. The humans planned this, Velian whispered in horror. They let us get defeated on purpose. More encrypted files revealed the full scope of human preparation. They had mapped every Devourer weakness, developed countermeasures for every adaptation strategy, and created battle plans that accounted for the loss of traditional galactic defenses. They had also calculated the acceptable losses required to make their strategy work. A priority message interrupted Velian's reading. It was from Commander Zephyr, now leading the desperate defense of the inner systems. The Devourers have broken through our final defensive line. They're heading for the core worlds. We estimate 36 hours before they reach Nexus Prime. Velian looked at the tactical display showing Devourer fleets converging on the galactic capital. Billions of beings from dozens of species were about to die, and there was nothing left to stop the machines. Then her console chimed with an incoming transmission, on a frequency that had been silent for months. The signal was encrypted with codes that only one species had ever used. Human codes. The message was short and came from somewhere in deep space. Phase 2 begins in 72 hours. Council species survival probability increases to 23% with human intervention protocols. Initiating Ghost Fleet activation. Ghost Fleet? Valian stared at the message. She had never heard humans use that term before. Another message arrived immediately after. Recommend all Council forces withdraw to minimum safe distance from Devourer fleets. Human assets deploying in 36 hours. Warning, do not attempt to assist human operations. Your intervention will reduce mission success probability to 0. Velian realized she was holding her breath. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the humans were still there. They had been watching, waiting, preparing while the galaxy burned. Around them. Council speaker, her communications officer called. I'm detecting massive energy signatures appearing throughout the system. Ships are decloaking all around us. On the display, dots of light began appearing in empty space. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Ships that had been invisible were suddenly revealing themselves in perfect formation around Nexus Prime. Identify those vessels, Velian ordered. They're not in any database, the officer replied. But they're transmitting human identification codes. The humans had returned, and they had brought friends. The human ships appeared out of nowhere, like ghosts becoming real. One moment, the space around Nexus Prime was empty except for fleeing refugee vessels. The next moment, thousands of human warships filled the darkness. Council Speaker Velian stared at her displays in shock. These weren't the simple human vessels she remembered from before the departure. These ships were larger, stranger, and built with technology she had never seen before. Where did they come from? She whispered. Her sensor operator worked frantically at his console. I'm not detecting any hyperspace signatures. They didn't jump here. They just appeared. Impossible, Commander Zephyr said over the communication channel. His surviving ships had retreated to the inner system when the Devourers broke through. The final defense line. No known technology allows ships to become completely invisible. The answer came on the human command frequency. A voice that sounded familiar spoke with quiet authority. Council forces, this is Admiral Kang Min of the IADA Human Defense Fleet. We have been monitoring your situation. Please maintain your current positions and do not interfere with our operations. Velian recognized the voice. Kang Min had been a simple trade liaison before the humans disappeared. He had spent his days negotiating shipping contracts and resolving cargo disputes. Now he commanded a fleet larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kang Min, this is Council Speaker Valian. Where have you been? We thought you had abandoned us. We never left, Speaker Valian. We have been preparing. On the tactical display, the Devourer fleets continued their advance toward the core, worlds. The machines had learned to move faster than any galactic vessel, and their adaptive shields made them nearly indestructible. Every conventional weapon had already proven useless against them. Admiral, our forces have tried everything, Valian transmitted. The Devourers adapt to any attack we make. They turn our own weapons against us. We know, Kang Min replied calmly. We have been watching your battles, learning from them. The Devourers are indeed formidable opponents when faced with predictable tactics. As he spoke, the human fleet began to move. But they didn't advance toward the Devourer ships like any normal military force would. Instead, they scattered in all directions, breaking into small groups that moved in seemingly random patterns. What are they doing? Commander Zephyr asked. That's not a battle formation. It's chaos. The first human ships reached the Devourer outer scouts. Instead of firing conventional weapons, they did something completely unexpected. They rammed directly into the machine vessels at full speed. Are they insane? Crystal Singer Harmony chimed in horror. They're committing suicide! But as the human ships struck their targets, something strange happened. The Devourer vessels didn't just take damage, they began to malfunction. Their adaptive systems went haywire. Their perfect formations broke apart as the machines lost coordination. What did they do? Valian asked. Admiral Kang Min's voice returned to the channel. Every human ship carries a special cargo. We call it the Chaos Virus. It's not a computer program. It's something the Devourers cannot adapt to because it makes no logical sense. More human vessels broke off from the main fleet and headed toward different Devourer groups. But each group used completely different tactics. Some ships fired weapons. That seemed to do no damage but made the machines stop moving. Others released clouds of strange particles that made Devourer vessels turn on each other. How is this possible? Commander Zephyr watched as his tactical computer tried and failed to make sense of the human attack patterns. There's no coordination, no strategy. They're doing random things. Not random, corrected a new voice on the channel. Unpredictable. The speaker identified herself as Unji, commander of the human boarding forces. On the display, Valian could see tiny human ships approaching the largest Devourer vessels. These ships were impossibly small compared to their targets. Commander. Unji, those Devourer ships are massive, Valian warned. Your boarding craft will be destroyed before you can even dock. We're not docking, Unji replied. Instead, the small human ships flew directly into the Devourer hulls. The machine vessels should have been able to destroy such tiny targets easily, but something was wrong with their defensive systems. The Chaos Virus had disrupted their ability to target small, fast-moving objects. The human boarding craft disappeared inside the Devourer ships. Minutes later, the massive machine vessels began to change course. Instead of attacking Council worlds, they turned toward other Devourer ships and opened fire. We're not trying to destroy them, Unji explained as more Devourer ships turned, against their own kind. We're giving them new programming. The Devourers are excellent at adapting to external threats, but they have trouble dealing with internal confusion. Across the battlefield, human tactics continued to make no sense to anyone watching. Some ships flew in perfect straight lines directly at enemy vessels, making themselves easy targets. Others moved in complex spirals that seemed to serve no purpose. A few groups of human ships simply stopped moving entirely and waited for the Devourers to approach them. But somehow, every impossible tactic worked. This is Commander Seok Jin leading the virus fleet, another human voice announced. We are beginning Phase 2 of the operation. a new group of human vessels appeared on the sensors. These ships were even smaller than the boarding craft, barely larger than escape pods. They moved toward the Devourer command ships in swarms, like insects attacking giants. "What are those?" Velian asked. "Virus carriers," Siak Jin explained. "Each one contains a different type of chaos program. The Devourers will try to adapt to each virus, but that's exactly what we want. Every adaptation they make creates new weaknesses. The tiny virus ships reached their targets and were immediately destroyed by Devourer defenses. But in the moments before their destruction, they transmitted their cargo directly into the machine networks. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Devourer ships began behaving erratically. Some spun in circles, others fired randomly at empty space. A few simply shut down completely as their adaptation systems overloaded, trying to process contradictory information. "Impossible," transmitted Prime Node Collective 7 from their hidden bunker. "The Devourers are the most advanced adaptive intelligence in the galaxy. How can simple chaos defeat them?" "Because," Admiral Kang Min replied, "adaptation requires logic. The Devourers expect their enemies to make sense. When faced with true randomness, with tactics that have no purpose except to confuse, their learning algorithms break down." "But how did you develop these tactics?" Velian asked. "How did you know they would work?" "We learned from the best teacher possible," Kangmin answered. "We learned from you." "From us?" "Every species in this galaxy has logical strengths and predictable weaknesses. Your military tactics follow established patterns. Your technologies develop in reasonable ways. The Devourers can adapt to logic and predict reasonable behavior." On the display, more Devourer fleets were falling into chaos as human virus ships reached them. The perfect machine formations were breaking apart as individual vessels began acting independently, or turned on their neighbors, or simply stopped functioning. "But humans," Kang Min continued, "have never been entirely logical. We do things that make no sense. We take risks that seem stupid. We sacrifice ourselves for people we barely know. We make decisions based on feelings instead of calculations. And the Devourers can't adapt to that. They can adapt to any technology, any weapon, any strategy, but they cannot adapt to pure chaos driven by emotions. They will never understand." A new voice joined the conversation. It was Bo Young, and Valian recognized her as the human who had coordinated supply lines for the Council fleets. "Speaker Valian, we need your help now. The Devourers are beginning to learn from our chaos tactics. We estimate 6 hours before they adapt enough to counter our virus attacks. What do you need us to do?" "Trust us completely. Follow our orders exactly, even when they make no sense. Can you do that?" Velian looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was somehow winning a battle that every military expert had declared impossible. They were defeating an enemy that had destroyed the galaxy's greatest civilizations using tactics that violated every rule of warfare. "Yes," she said, "we trust you." "Good. Then prepare for Phase 3. We're taking the fight to their source." The journey to the galactic core took 18 hours. The combined human and council fleets moved through space that had been empty for 3,000 years, following ancient star charts that most species had forgotten existed. Council Speaker Velian watched the fleet movements from her flagship, still trying to understand human tactics. The ships moved in patterns that looked random, but somehow worked perfectly together. When Devourer scouts attacked, human vessels would scatter like frightened fish, only to regroup and destroy their enemies using methods that made no tactical sense. "How are they doing this?" Commander Zephyr asked for the 100th time. His remaining Altarian ships were following human orders, but his military mind struggled to accept strategies that violated everything he had learned about warfare. "They're not thinking like soldiers," Crystal Singer Harmony observed. "They're thinking like children playing games." She was right. The humans fought like they were having fun, taking impossible risks and celebrating small victories, with enthusiasm that seemed inappropriate for a desperate battle. When Subin's battle group destroyed a Devourer command ship by ramming it while singing human war songs, her crew cheered like they had won a sports competition. Admiral Kang Min, Velian transmitted to the human flagship. "Your people seem happy. How can they be enjoying this?" "Because," Kang Min replied, "fear makes you predictable. Joy makes you creative. The Devourers expect us to be afraid of death. Instead, we choose to be excited about life." The fleet continued deeper into the core, passing the remnants of ancient civilizations that had fallen to previous Devourer invasions. Dead worlds circled cold stars, their surfaces stripped of everything useful. The machines had been harvesting the galaxy's resources for millions of years, building towards something enormous. Sensors are detecting massive energy readings ahead, reported Hyun Soo, a young human who served as fleet navigator. "The source is impossible to measure. It's bigger than anything we've ever seen." On the main display, the Devourer home base finally came into view. It wasn't a planet or a space station. It was a construct that dwarfed entire star systems, a mechanical structure so vast that it bent light around itself. Millions of Devourer ships moved around it like insects around a hive. "The Queen Mind," Admiral Kang Min said quietly. "The central intelligence that controls every Devourer in the galaxy. Destroy it, and the entire machine network collapses." "How?" Commander Zephyr stared at the impossible structure. "Our combined fleets are tiny compared to that thing. Even if we destroyed 1,000,000 Devourer ships, there would still be millions more. We're not going to fight all of them," Kang Min replied. "We're going to do something the Queen Mind will never expect." The human fleet began to spread out around the massive construct. But instead of attacking, they started transmitting. Every human ship broadcast different signals: music, poetry, mathematical formulas that served no purpose, random conversations between crew members. "What are you doing?" Velian asked. "We're confusing it," explained Nari, the human fleet coordinator. "The Queen Mind is trying to analyze our transmissions to predict our attack strategy. But there is no strategy. We're just talking." The Devourer response was immediate and massive. Millions of machine ships poured out of the construct, moving in perfect formations to engage the human fleet. Their coordination was flawless, their firepower overwhelming, and that was exactly what the humans had hoped for. "All ships, begin the final dance," Admiral Kang Min ordered. What happened next defied every military principle ever written. Human ships broke formation and scattered in all directions, but not randomly. They moved like dancers, each vessel following its own rhythm while somehow staying in harmony with the others. "It's beautiful," Crystal Singer Harmony chimed in wonder. "They're fighting like they're performing art." The Devourer ships tried to adapt to this new tactic, but how do you counter poetry in motion? How do you predict movements based on music only humans could hear? The machines fired at empty space while human vessels danced around them, striking with weapons that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. "Subin's group is making their final run," Nari reported. "They're heading directly for the Queen Mind's central core." On the display, Commander Subin led her battle group in a suicidal charge toward the heart of the massive construct. Her ships were vastly outnumbered, and everyone watching knew they wouldn't survive the mission. "Subin, this is Velian. You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "Thank you, Speaker," Subin replied, her voice calm and happy. "But this is why we trained. This is why we left. To make sure you all get to go home." Her ships punched through the Devourer defenses using tactics that made no sense. They flew in spirals when straight lines would have been faster. They stopped to help damaged vessels when speed was crucial. They acted like humans instead of soldiers, and the machines couldn't understand them. Subin's flagship reached the Queen Mind's core just as her ship began to fall apart under enemy fire. Instead of launching missiles or firing weapons, she did something completely unexpected. She opened a communication channel to the Queen Mind itself. "Hello?" she said simply. "We need to talk." The Queen Mind responded, its vast intelligence focusing on this tiny human ship. It expected threats, demands, or final desperate bargaining. Instead, Subin began to tell it about her childhood on Earth, about the flowers she had grown in her garden, about the songs her mother had taught her. The Queen Mind tried to analyze this data for tactical significance. It searched for hidden meanings, secret codes, psychological warfare techniques, but there were none. Subin was simply sharing her life with an enemy that had never encountered genuine human emotion. "I know you don't understand," Subin continued, as her ship's hull cracked under the pressure of enemy weapons. "But I want you to know that we don't hate you. We just can't let you hurt our friends." And then young Hyun-soo, following Subin's lead, connected his consciousness directly to the Queen Mind's network. Not to plant a virus or steal information, but to show the machine intelligence what it felt like to be human. The effect was catastrophic for the Queen Mind. For millions of years, it had processed only logic, efficiency, and the pursuit of resources. Suddenly, it experienced love, fear, hope, and sacrifice. It felt the joy Subin had experienced growing flowers, the sadness Hyun-soo felt leaving, his family, the fierce protectiveness that drove humans to fight impossible battles for people they barely knew. The Queen Mind's perfect logic systems couldn't process these emotions. It had been designed to understand everything, but human feelings were beyond its comprehension. The contradiction between logic and emotion created a cascade failure that spread through its entire network. Across the galaxy, every devourer ship suddenly stopped moving as their central intelligence collapsed under the weight of human emotion. The war was over. But the price had been enormous. Subin's battle group was gone. Thousands of human vessels had been destroyed. Entire council, fleets had been sacrificed to buy time for the final assault. "Speaker Velian," Admiral Kang Min transmitted as the surviving ships regrouped, "the immediate threat is over, but we have much work to do." Work, rebuilding, healing, learning to live together again. The galaxy has changed, and so have we. In the months that followed, as species across the galaxy rebuilt their worlds and fleets, a new understanding emerged. The humans hadn't left because they stopped caring about their galactic neighbors. They had left because they cared so much that they were willing to sacrifice everything to protect them. The new human representative to the rebuilt council was Jin-A, a former engineer who had helped design the chaos viruses. She addressed the assembled species with characteristic human directness. "We know you have questions about why we kept our preparations secret. The truth is simple. If you had known what was coming, you would have tried to help us prepare. And that kindness would have doomed us all." "How?" asked the new Vorthak representative. "Because the Devourers would have detected your preparations. They would have adapted their strategies accordingly. Our only advantage was that they didn't know we were coming." Commander Zephyr, now promoted to lead the new Galactic Defense Force, nodded slowly. "So you let us think you had abandoned us." "We never abandoned you," Jenny replied. "Every human who died in this war died protecting someone they had never met, from species they barely understood, because that's what friends do for each other." The rebuilt galaxy was different from the old one. Humans no longer hid their true nature behind diplomatic smiles and trade negotiations. Other species learned that their strange human friends were capable of incredible sacrifice and impossible victories. But perhaps most importantly, they all learned that sometimes the people who seem to abandon you are actually the ones who love you most. The humans had departed, and the galaxy had indeed known it was doomed. What they hadn't known was that doom could be defeated by friendship, sacrifice, and the uniquely human ability to find joy in the darkest places. The galaxy was safe, and the humans were home.